Taiwan blacklists 3 Chinese schools from student exchange over alleged ties to China's United Front Department.
І надійним миром. І так, щоб Росія не змогла прийти в Україну ще раз, і щоб повернулись українці з російського полону, і щоб в Україні було майбутнє.
The presidents of Ukraine and the U.S. trade barbs over meetings to end the Ukraine war that have left out Kyiv. Students across Indonesia are protesting government budget cuts they say could affect essential services. Plus, a village in the Philippines is making a unique offer as it seeks to bring a dengue fever outbreak under control. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Betty Chen. Taiwan's Education Ministry says it will blacklist 3 Chinese education institutions for alleged ties to Beijing's United Front, essentially banning student exchange programs with Taiwan. Reese Ayers is live in Taipei with more details. Reese, which universities are the target of this ban?
Well, Betty, there are, as you mentioned, 3 institutions, 2 universities, that's Huaqiao and Jinan, and also the Beijing Chinese Language and Culture College. And there are over 2,000 Taiwanese students enrolled in those schools. And among some of the alma mater of those schools, actually some Taiwanese lawmakers. Education Minister Zheng Yingyao, he said that those particular schools are actually under the control of something called the United Front Work Department. Now, that's a body that's been set up by the Chinese Communist Party. They gather intelligence on and attempt to influence so-called elite individuals from outside of China, and that's including from Taiwan. Minister Zheng said that the measure is necessary to prevent China from systematically trying to influence or even recruit Taiwanese students, and the education providers themselves have a responsibility to Taiwan to protect national security, adding that qualifications from those universities as of February 20th will no longer be recognized, though that won't affect students who graduated previously. But I was earlier at the Mainland Affairs Council. They deal with relations between China and Taiwan. I was there to ask about qualifications of the students who are currently enrolled in those schools, and here's what they said.
我想教育部他对于这些还在学的学生他的权益，我想他会采取教育部会有其他的方法我觉得这些学生的就学权益基本上基本上是必须要保障必须要保障，但是具体的这个政策到底是什么那有待教育部来做决定。
Now, the Deputy Minister there did go on to say that there may be some help for students currently enrolled in those schools to perhaps transfer their courses to other institutions, but actually their qualifications are going to be a bit up in the air for now. But institutions in Taiwan who are found defying that ban will lose their government subsidies, but individual students can still apply to those universities, though probably not many people are going to want to do that, given that their degrees won't be recognized here in Taiwan. Now, alongside various limitations on diplomats and tourists traveling between China and Taiwan, this is yet another restriction on exchanges across the strait, further souring already turbulent relations.
Thank you, Reese. That was Reese Ayers, live for us in Taipei. A senior Democratic Progressive Party lawmaker is the latest legislator being investigated for fraud. As Wesley Lewis reports, she's one of several high-profile politicians to be hit by a crackdown on corruption. Wesley Lewis reports.
Finding herself in the hot seat, senior Democratic Progressive Party lawmaker Lin Daihua has been accused of fraudulently claiming fees for assistance. Charges she says amount to political persecution as she had been the frontrunner for her party's nomination in the 2026 Kaohsiung mayoral race. Prosecutors are now searching Lin's legislative office and her residence. Lin's case is just the latest in a series of high-profile corruption investigations. Former Kuomintang lawmaker Sufin Sulugu is also facing possible charges after he allegedly accepted bribes of over $150,000 to pressure energy officials to restart a failed solar power project in Pingdong in the country's south. Allegations he firmly denies. President Lai Ching-te has previously vowed to root out government corruption, no matter the party, a mission that his ruling party, the DPP, says it has embraced.
赖清德主席也已经公开的来谈论过，民进党的态度就是不论党派，不论何人，只要涉及非法，就检调就应该查办，勿枉勿纵。
Perhaps the most prominent public figure in the country facing corruption charges is Ko Wen-je, the founder of the Taiwan People's Party and former presidential hopeful. Accused of accepting bribes related to real estate development while he was Taipei mayor and embezzling political donations during his 2024 presidential campaign, he's being held in detention as he awaits trial. As prosecutors continue cracking down on corruption, it's revealing a fractured political system across the country's party lines. Chris Ma and Wesley Lewis for TaiwanPlus.
There's more strain on a relationship between Washington and Kiev after U.S. President Donald Trump launched an attack on his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. It comes as Ukraine peace talks ramp up between Russia and the U.S. Rosie Greninger reports.
As the US advances talks with Russia to end the war in Ukraine without Kyiv's involvement, it sparked a row between US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. On his social media platform, Trump accused the Ukrainian leader of being a dictator and took aim at his approval ratings. Trump made the same claims while speaking in Florida.
He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break.
Ukrainian law prohibits elections during periods of martial law, which the country has been under since Russia began its invasion nearly 3 years ago. Zelenskyy hit back at Trump's claims, saying the US leader is living in a disinformation space and accused him of spreading Russian propaganda.
І надійним миром. І так, щоб Росія не змогла прийти в Україну ще раз. І щоб повернулись українці з російського полону. І щоб в Україні було майбутнє. Це нормальне бажання кожної нації. Багато зустрічей, нарад сьогодні, командування армії, розвідка, міністри для підготовки до перемовин з представником.
That after Trump also wrongfully claimed Ukraine started the war, when it was Russia that launched a full-scale invasion in 2022 after years of aggression. The almost 3-year war has claimed the lives of 12,000 Ukrainian civilians and tens of thousands of soldiers, leaving many Ukrainians feeling betrayed by Trump's comments.
Вибори під час війни вони взагалі неможливі. Тому що багато людей повиїжджало. Це взагалі не актуальне питання. Витрачати кошти зараз під час війни на вибори.
Я вважаю, що це невірна політика і невірне звинувачення України. Звинувачують жертву, і він стає на бік ворога.
The US president has repeatedly praised his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, calling him a savvy and strong leader. The two heads of state are expected to meet soon after US and Russian officials kicked off what they say were successful peace negotiations in Saudi Arabia early this week. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says his country won't accept any deal made without Kyiv's involvement, while Putin welcomes the rekindling of relations with the US.
Да, и самое главное здесь в решении всех очень острых вопросов, включая и украинское урегулирование, заключается в том, что без повышения уровня доверия между Россией и Соединенными Штатами решить многие вопросы, в том числе и украинский кризис, невозможно.
Trump's move closer to Russia is a complete backflip of the previous Biden administration's stance. They refused to speak to Moscow since the outbreak of war and also became Ukraine's biggest financial backer. But policy analysts say Trump's new direction might not indicate a major change in US policy.
There's a cost to Trump and his desire to end the war quickly in that agenda. Because, as he said rightly, 2 or 3 days into his second presidency, Putin's the obstacle. And if Putin is the obstacle, which he is, Trump needs to make clear it is his highest priority by giving the proper disincentives for Putin to continue the war.
But as the US leader threatens to cut funding to Ukraine, it has spurred some action by Kiev's European neighbours. After a summit in Paris earlier this week, EU leaders reiterated their support for Ukraine, moving to rapidly increase defence spending.
Några konkreta saker som togs upp och där vi tydligt står enade. Det första är fred genom styrka. Det låter bättre på engelska. Peace through strength. Att det är bara ett Ukraina som rustas för att kunna klara av att i en stark position förhandla om fred. Det är bara så vi kan trygga freden i vår del av världen.
And diplomats are continuing to work towards bringing an end to the conflict. A US envoy is in Kyiv to discuss American support for Ukraine. And the British Prime Minister and French President are expected to visit Washington to discuss the war with Donald Trump. Increasingly important talks as the relationship between the US, Europe and Ukraine fracture. Delphine Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te says his country won't be intimidated by China. He was speaking at the Halifax International Security Forum in the capital, Taipei, the first time it's been held outside of North America. Rick Gloward reports.
Taiwan is welcoming government and military officials from around the world here to the capital, Taipei, as it hosts one of the world's largest defence summits, the Halifax International Security Forum, here in Asia for the first time. On the agenda are some of the most pressing security issues of this age, from ending Russia's war on Ukraine to countering China's influence here in the Indo-Pacific. To open the two-day summit, Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te saying that his country is determined to stand up to authoritarianism.
Taiwan holds a key position on the first island chain, directly facing an authoritarian threat. But we will not be intimidated. We will stand firm and safeguard our national sovereignty, maintain our free and democratic way of life.
From disinformation's pivotal role in modern warfare to cutting out high technology from your adversary's weapon supply chains, defence leaders here are weighing in on issues affecting security here in the Asia-Pacific and beyond. Taiwan, so often denied a voice on the world stage due to pressure from China, it's a unique opportunity to engage with like-minded partners and show solidarity in an increasingly polarised world. Joseph Wu and Rick Lowett in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
For more on the Halifax Security Forum, Rick Gloward earlier spoke to Olena Tregub, the Secretary General of Ukraine's Independent Anti-Corruption Commission.
You'll be speaking at the Halifax Forum whilst you're in Taipei. Given how quickly things are moving in Ukraine, what message do you expect to bring from that part of Europe here to Taiwan and this region?
The most important lesson that we learned during this war is that we need to have resilience and self-reliance, to be independent and strong. And then it wouldn't matter who wins elections in which country. We are a strong nation with very strong identity, with very strong determination to preserve our sovereignty, to preserve our democracy in Ukraine. Even if Donald Trump thinks that we should surrender to Russia or should surrender part of our country to Russia or completely to Russia, as he said, he doesn't care much because he said you might be Russian, you might be not. Well, my message is that in Ukraine we do care. We don't want to be Russian, and we will pursue this goal, this fight, which is lasting for centuries actually. And we will look for partnerships, for alliances with Europe, with Taiwan, with other democratic nations in the world.
Disinformation has obviously been a big part of the conflict in Ukraine, and just recently Zelenskyy has said that Donald Trump is living in a disinformation space based on what his comments on the conflict in Ukraine. Does this mean the battle against disinformation on the Ukraine conflict is being lost, or?
Well, Russia was very successful, unfortunately. I think what is important that the battle against disinformation inside Ukraine was won, so our people know the truth. Because we see how Russian bomb is exploding and killing kids in front of our eyes. So we right now are less susceptible to disinformation that Russia is good and Russia wants to come back and bring Soviet Union and everybody will prosper. No, Russia is just killing people, destroying country. So Donald Trump, he of course is broadcasting Russian disinformation right now, which is quite shocking. However, I think the longer he deals with Putin, the longer he is in this negotiation, the more he will understand that he is actually believing in some wrong narratives.
We talked a bit about self-reliance, making society more resilient, but there's also kind of the weapons and not relying on foreign assistance when it comes to weapons. Can you tell us about how Ukraine is helping to arm itself and what lessons Taiwan could learn from that?
So Ukraine did not fully arm itself after 2014 because Ukraine didn't fully expect that there will be escalation, there will be a full-scale invasion. And my organization was part of their effort to build up our industrial base, to boost our own defense production after 2014. So now, at a very high speed, we did an incredible job in this last 3 years of full-scale war. We have hundreds and hundreds of new companies in private sector, in public sector, who make our own strategic drones that we send deep inside Russia. We're making our own missile, our own ammunition. We're doing it now in emergency like mode. Every 6 weeks we update, for example, our drone capabilities, our software settings, because we are in an arms race now with Russia. They adjust their weapon, we adjust their weapon. And here, of course, we can share a lot of experience with Taiwan as well, because a lot of Chinese technology is used at this war. We rely on China too, because China supplies equipment to Russia, technology to Russia, helping them to gain microchips, CNC machine tools from US, from Europe. China is the main transshipment hub. But Ukraine also gets some components for our drones from China. So this is also something very important to analyze for Taiwan.
That was Olena Tregup from Ukraine's Independent Anti-Corruption Commission. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back shortly with more international news.
2025 is calling. Louder, brighter, and bolder. From the roar of the crowds to the quiet moments of triumph. A year to experience sports at its finest. Grab your tickets, tune in, and cheer like never before. Every play counts. Every minute matters. Game on Taiwan.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Hamas has returned the bodies of 4 Israelis taken hostage during the militant group's 2023 attack on Israel. The 4 hostages include a mother and her 2 young children. Hamas says they were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. It's part of an ongoing hostage and prisoner exchange between Israel and Hamas during a 6-week ceasefire. Hamas has agreed to return 25 Israeli hostages and 8 bodies, while Israel will release 1,500 Palestinian prisoners. Huge protests in Indonesia as thousands take to the streets calling out funding cuts that critics say will hinder access to key sectors and welfare services. They're demanding the government re-evaluate its new austerity measures. Gino Lopez reports.
Thousands of university students take to the streets across Indonesia, decrying the budget efficiency policies of the country's president, Prabowo Subianto, the 72-year-old former general who assumed the elected office just 5 months ago.
This policy has significantly impacted the livelihoods of civil society and also key human rights and law enforcement institutions.
Prabowo's budget efficiency policy aims to cut funding to various government institutions in the name of mitigating what it sees as wasteful government spending. Among the impacted sectors are education, health, and natural disaster prevention. Opponents argue that it will cut funding for scholarships, lay off government contractual workers, and discontinue key welfare programs for the poor. The budget cuts were justified as a way to fund a free meal program, the hallmark of Prabowo's presidential campaign. The program aims to combat malnutrition by providing daily nutritious meals to children and pregnant women. But critics call it wasteful and inefficient, pointing out its exorbitant budget and the simultaneous cuts to primary and secondary education. Analysts warn the cuts will have sweeping effects across society.
Budget cuts are also applied to different ministries and agencies. There could be a massive layoff in the future, which means that some parents would actually lose their jobs, while at the same time their children lose their scholarship.
During his presidential campaign, Prabowo distanced himself from his involvement in the country's dictatorial past and promised to usher in a golden era. Instead, public opposition to his policies has twisted that slogan in protest, with the hashtag #DarkIndonesia trending on social media. The movement eventually took to the streets, with student councils across the nation putting forward a list of demands, including that the government reassess budget slashes, the free meal program, and other large-scale projects. They also want the government to properly compensate teachers and implement pro-people policies by listening to input and criticism from the public. In response to protests, Indonesia's Secretary of State insisted that the budget cuts will not affect the education sector. But the demonstrators are still awaiting an official response from government, vowing to continue protesting for the rest of the week. Hank Chu and Gino Lopez for TaiwanPlus.
Australia and Papua New Guinea plan to upgrade their security cooperation agreement to a full defense pact.
We live in a world which is increasingly strategically complex. This is a moment where it is really important that we are working with our closest of friends, but in this case, we are working with family, and that is very much how we see our relationship with Papua New Guinea.
The aim is to make the militaries of both countries more closely integrated. It's one of several agreements Australia has already signed or plans to sign with Papua New Guinea in response to China's spreading influence in the region. Microsoft has unveiled a new chip it says will make powerful quantum computing possible in the near future. The company says its new Majorana 1 chip uses particle physics and a new material to reach a state of matter that only once existed in theory. Microsoft compared its new technology to the development of the semiconductor, which paved the way for modern computing. It says the chip could help make quantum computers possible in years, not decades, and could lead to breakthroughs in fields such as medicine and chemistry. Cash for mosquitoes? That's the offer in one village in the Philippines as it tries to hold a spike in dengue fever cases. Cadence Curanta reports.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
In this village in the Philippines, mosquitoes have a bounty on their heads. 1 peso for every 5 mosquitoes, captured and dumped into a UV light machine, which village officials call the death chamber. The project is an attempt to address a rise in cases of dengue fever across the Philippines this year. Dengue is rarely life-threatening, but can cause high fevers, rashes, and pain. And it's spread primarily by mosquito bites.
Ito pong ginawa naming programa is one of our alternative project na innovation approach na para hikayatin yung ating mga kababayan na maging parte ng pagsugpo ng what you call this ng dengue.
By the beginning of February this year, the country had already seen over 20,000 dengue cases, a 40% rise from the same period last year. With many falling sick, residents of this village in central Manila are enthusiastic about catching mosquitoes.
Yung mga nahuli ko, malaking tulong na rin po. Marami na rin po hindi makakagat ng lamok kasi nabawasan na po yung lamok.
But others have suggested the project is useless, with one public health expert warning that by catching mosquitoes, villagers could make the problem even worse. The country's health department says the best solution would probably be to wear protective clothing and to get rid of any stagnant water. For now, though, in this neighborhood, mosquitoes continue to be captured and sent to their demise. Scott Huang and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally, today we leave you with some highlights from the Nazaré Big Wave Challenge in Portugal. I'm Betty Chen. Take care and see you next time.